It has been coming to your garden for months. You have seen it occasionally, the small shape crossing the lawn, the rustling near the compost, the evidence of something systematic having moved through. And then, one week, nothing. You assume it moved on. These things happen. Animals are unpredictable, but that is not what happened. What happened is more specific, more deliberate, and more revealing about the intelligence of this animal than most people ever consider. The hedgehog did not move on randomly. It made a comparison. Your garden was evaluated against something it found on its extended route, and the evaluation returned a result specific enough to change the allocation of its limited nightly time, to reduce what it spent in your garden and increase what it spent somewhere else. The hedgehog found a better garden, and what it does with that information, how it uses it, how long the comparison runs, whether your garden can change the result, is what this video is about. The hedgehog does not compare gardens the way a human compares options. It does not make lists. It does not weigh factors consciously. It has no awareness of the word better. What it has is behavioral allocation. Time and energy spent in one location comes at the cost of time and energy available for another. A hedgehog with a route covering multiple garden stops must allocate its limited nightly window, typically 4 to 6 hours of active foraging, across those stops in a way that maximizes caloric return. This allocation is not fixed. It is continuously updated by experience. A garden stop that reliably produces high prey density receives more time. A stop that consistently underperforms receives less. Over multiple nights, the time allocation shifts to reflect the comparative performance of each stop on the route. This is not a decision made on any single night. It is a pattern that emerges from accumulated experience, but it functions exactly like a comparison. Your garden is being benchmarked against every other stop on the route, every night, based on actual caloric return data. If a new garden enters the hedgehog's range, through exploration, through a newly opened gap, through the collapse of a territorial boundary, it gets tested, visited, its performance measured against the existing stops. If it outperforms your garden, the allocation shifts. Your garden receives less time. The comparison has run. The result has been entered. Better, in hedgehog terms, is specific. It is not about aesthetics, not about size, not about whether the garden is beautiful or tidy or has prize-winning roses. It is about 4 things. Prey density, the concentration of earthworms, beetles, slugs, and other invertebrates available per square meter of accessible ground. A garden with rich, undisturbed organic soil, with leaf litter, log piles, and unmown sections, typically outperforms a managed lawn on this criterion. Water reliability. A garden with consistent accessible water, a shallow dish, a pond with accessible edges, a naturally damp section, scores higher than one where water is absent or intermittent. Shelter quality. A garden that offers viable day nest sites, log piles, shed gaps, dense shrub bases, undisturbed corners, provide something your garden may lack if it is fully managed. Safety profile. The human presence pattern in the garden, whether lights go out at a predictable time, whether the garden is disturbed unpredictably, whether chemical treatments have reduced the invertebrate population. A garden that outperforms yours on any of these criteria will attract increased allocation. One that outperforms on several will attract dramatically more. The hedgehog is not choosing the prettier garden. It is choosing the more productive one. Before we continue, an honest question. If a hedgehog were evaluating your garden right now against your neighbor's gardens, on prey density, water, shelter, and safety, how do you think your garden would rank? Write your honest assessment in the comments. The responses are always more varied than you might expect. When a better garden is found, the change in behavior is gradual, not immediate, not a single night decision. The first visit to the new garden produces an initial assessment. If it is positive, a return visit follows. If the second visit confirms the first, If the prey density is consistently higher, the water accessible, the shelter viable, the new garden begins receiving increasing time allocation. This happens over days and weeks, not overnight. The hedgehog does not abandon your garden immediately. It continues visiting, but the duration of those visits shortens. The intensity of the hunting, the thoroughness of the sweep pattern, the time spent at each productive zone reduces. Your garden is being visited less thoroughly, not because anything dramatic happened, not because you did anything wrong on a specific night, because the comparative performance data accumulated across multiple visits to both gardens has shifted the allocation. If the new garden continues to outperform, the shift continues. Your garden moves from a primary stop to a secondary one, visited briefly, checked for scent mark renewal, then departed. Eventually, in cases where the performance differential is large enough, your garden may be dropped from the regular route entirely. Not abandoned. The infrastructure is still there. The gap still exists. The route still passes nearby. But the time allocation reaches zero. The hedgehog is still there, in the neighborhood. It just isn't there, in your garden, anymore. The entire comparison process is invisible to you. You cannot see the allocation shifting. You cannot observe the performance benchmarking. You do not know when a new garden entered the hedgehog's range. You cannot track the gradual reduction in visit duration that preceded the apparent disappearance. What you see is the end result. The hedgehog was here. Now it isn't. And the gap between those two observable states contains weeks of behavioral data, comparative assessments, and allocation decisions that ran without any human awareness. This is what makes hedgehog disappearance from a garden so difficult to interpret correctly. The disappearance almost never has a single cause. It is the end point of a process. A process that began when the hedgehog first encountered something that scored higher on its ongoing assessment than what your garden was providing. The good news, and there is good news, is that the process runs in both directions. A garden that improves its comparative performance can recover its allocation. Not immediately, not automatically. But the hedgehog that stopped visiting your garden has not forgotten it. Your garden's location is still in its spatial memory. The root infrastructure still exists. The gap is still there. What the hedgehog needs to return is a reason, and that reason is measurable, specific, and in most cases, achievable. The hedgehog that stopped visiting your garden has not erased it. Spatial memory in hedgehogs is persistent. Locations that were once productive, that registered positive caloric return data across multiple visits, are not simply discarded when the allocation drops to zero. They are retained. Researchers studying hedgehog territory use in monitored garden networks found that animals would return to previously abandoned garden stops after periods of non-use, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, without any visible prompting. The location was simply still in the spatial memory, still associated with the resource profile established during the period of active use. What this means for your garden is specific. The hedgehog that found a better garden elsewhere has not closed the file on yours. It has deprioritized it. The difference matters. A closed file requires discovery all over again. The boundary assessment, the first cautious entry, the initial mapping. A deprioritized location can be revisited with the efficiency of an already known space. When the hedgehog returns to a previously deprioritized garden, it goes directly to the locations it knew. The compost corner, the damp section, the fence gap it used before. If those locations have improved, if the resource profile has changed since the last visit, the reallocation can begin again. Your garden has not been forgotten. It is waiting to be worth returning to. The comparison that caused a hedgehog to spend less time in your garden never truly stops. Conditions change, and when they do, the results can change too. A garden that was once the best stop on the route may lose its advantage. A fence may block access, a new dog may reduce safety, or a dry summer may make water harder to find. Small changes can alter how valuable a garden becomes. At the same time, your garden can improve. A new fence gap can increase access. A regularly filled water dish can provide a reliable resource during dry periods. A log pile can create shelter and attract insects. Stopping the use of slug pellets can allow prey populations to recover. These improvements do not work overnight. Insect populations need time to rebuild, and new habitats take months to become fully productive. But the hedgehog's assessment responds to real changes. If your garden genuinely becomes a better place to forage, drink, and shelter, the comparison reflects it, and a better result means more time spent in your garden. Here is something worth thinking about. If you were going to make one specific change to your garden to improve its comparative score for a hedgehog, which of the 4 criteria would you focus on first? Prey density, water, shelter, or safety? Write your choice and reasoning in the comments. The thinking people do on this question is always worth reading. When a hedgehog returns to a deprioritized garden, the visit is very different from a first encounter. A first visit is cautious and exploratory. The hedgehog is mapping an unfamiliar space for the first time. A return visit is based on memory. The hedgehog already knows the garden's key locations, so it goes directly to them, but it does not assume they are unchanged. It reassesses them. Is the compost heap still productive? Does the damp corner still attract earthworms? Is the shelter beneath the shed still usable? The hedgehog is not building a new map. It is updating an existing one. Because of this, any improvements made before the return visit are noticed immediately. Better food availability, improved shelter, or safer access can influence the garden's value from the very first reassessment. Timing matters. A garden that improves before the hedgehog returns has the best chance of regaining its place on the route. The comparison never ends. A hedgehog does not permanently choose a garden and remain loyal to it forever. Every night, it compares each stop on its route against the alternatives available. A garden that improves can become more important. A garden that declines can lose priority. The hedgehog allocates its time according to current conditions, not habit. But this also reveals something important. The relationship between a hedgehog and a garden is reciprocal. The garden provides food, water, shelter, and safety. The hedgehog brings its presence and plays its role within the local ecosystem. As long as the garden continues meeting the hedgehog's needs, the result remains the same. The hedgehog keeps coming back. Not because of loyalty, because every time it reassesses the options, your garden continues to be worth choosing. The hedgehog that stopped visiting your garden made a comparison. Your garden lost. Not permanently, not irreversibly, but clearly enough that the allocation shifted, the visits reduced, and eventually the presence ended. And the hedgehog that still visits your garden, the one you see occasionally, the shape crossing the lawn at dusk, is also making a comparison. Every night, your garden is in it, currently winning, currently returning enough of what the assessment requires to stay on the active route, to receive a meaningful time allocation, to be worth the nightly visit. The question worth sitting with is not whether the comparison runs. It always runs. The question is what your garden is offering into it, whether the prey density is sufficient, whether the water dish is there and full, whether the shelter infrastructure exists, whether the safety profile, the predictable human pattern, the absence of chemical treatments, supports an animal that is making a rational allocation decision every single night. You cannot stop the comparison, but you can influence the result. The hedgehog visiting your garden is comparing it to others right now. What do you think your garden's strongest quality is? The thing most likely to keep it on the route? Leave your answer in the comments. Every video on this channel is built on documented research, real behavior, no exaggeration, no guesswork. If that is what brought you here, you already know what to do.